I can't see.
And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations. You made it through the week with your glasses or without your glasses. We are here. If you're new, welcome, Pull Up a Chair. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And every single Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we do a live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we talk about all things quality assurance and food safety. And as the name implies, this is not a lecture. This is meant to be a chat. This is a discussion with the objective of sharing food safety knowledge and making everything a little bit safer. And with that, I get to bring amazing experts on our chat, like this gentleman sitting opposite me with those very sexy glasses, Joe Laino with Comprehensive Food Safety. Joe, how are you doing today,
Hi,
sir?
how are you? Glad to be back. Nice, missed you.
I feel like I want some glasses now, too.
They reflect, and they're like these blue blocking. They don't kill your eyes on the computer, but they reflect. So we'll just pretend I can see.
I lucked out in that aspect, in that so I can see well up close, but I can't see far as I wear glasses for driving and stuff like that. But like you and I, we do a whole lot of work at this distance, so I guess it's an advantage from that
sweet spot, as they say.
That's a good thing. So as we love to do here on the chat, everybody, is we put in where in the world we're at, and today I'm in Loveland, Colorado, where Joseph, it's going to be. Last I saw, what is it now? In Loveland, Colorado, it's going to be a beautiful 82 freaking degrees today. Where are you at?
I am in rockin' downtown Clover, South Carolina.
And how's your weather looking?
Well, if it would stop raining long enough, I could tell you, because we're in like our fourth day of rain. It hadn't rained in 6 weeks, and we've had like 3 months worth of rain in 4 days or something like that.
Do you still have your ducks?
We do. I'm looking right at them. And we're tired of paying $8 a dozen for eggs, so we're getting into the chicken businesses.
There you go. Well, I've actually heard that, duck eggs in a lot of ways are superior to chicken eggs.
Yeah, it's a taste thing, and I'm not a duck egg fan. My neighbors love them, so I just give them to them.
There you go. You can do like one of those little roadside things. I always love that, where you sell the eggs and you have the little box where people put money in.
Yeah, I'm afraid of selling eggs, because if somebody gets sick, I sold them a bad egg, and then that's just...
Yeah.
Then the meat.
Yeah, then you got
that's the topic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, everybody, please join us this morning for a ceremonial sip of your favorite beverage. Cheers. Hey, Chris. Good morning. Good to see you. Very, very nice, dapper, professional-looking little picture he's got there. That's always a good thing. So, gosh, let's dive in. We got a ton to go over here today. So, before we get going, time for the dad joke, Joe. Are you ready? Are you ready for the dad joke?
I've got my seatbelt strapped in.
All right. Well, and really, this kind of goes back to, I was thinking about this because, this time of year, you tend to do, lots of projects around the house and stuff like this, and you work on your honey-do list. And I had a ton of stuff, Joe, to do this last weekend. Mm-hmm. So I tried something new, and Melanie Ray relate to this, but I actually hired a handyman, and I'm always a little, it's kind of, a knock on your man card if you do that, but I hired a handyman, and I had a big list of stuff for him to do, Joe. And at the end on Friday, he came back around and said, okay, I'm all done. And I looked at my list, and on my list, he'd only done numbers 1, 3, and 5 on my list, which was pretty crazy. And so after I, talked with him a little bit, I've kind of figured it out. Turns out he only does odd jobs.
I'm sitting here biting my lip so I don't give on. That is a horrendous dad. I mentioned that for Christmas last year, my kids gave me, and my kids are all grown, they gave me a 1-page per day dad joke calendar. I've done nothing but rifle off dad jokes to them every single day, and they despise my doing. You bought me the calendar.
There you go. Yeah, I got a Dilbert calendar that I look at every day. But today I took the so for the younger people out there in our audience, I took the Norm Macdonald approach there to telling a joke. Right? You can almost hear it in his voice. So they, hey, tell you what, there, Joe. This weekend, I was doing some stuff. Yeah, doing stuff. But for anybody who doesn't know who Norm Macdonald is, he was on Saturday Night Live, did the weekend
Google
update.
him.
he made that. And my favorite joke of all time, I think he was on Conan O'Brien. Look it up, guys, online, is the moth joke. MOTH, like the moth joke. I love the moth joke. And there's actually, after you listen to the moth joke, there's a story behind it too. So look at that as well. But wow, Ruth is in Poland. Awesome. Look at that. That is super cool.
Maybe that's Poland.
What's that doing?
I don't think so.
Never been to Poland. I hear it's very nice, very pretty country. Wow, look at that. Awesome, cool, very. Come on the subject. Oh, okay. Well, Daniel's ready for us to go.
Let's get this.
Well, really, and I'll work this in for you, Daniel, is that the topic for today is kind of what we're doing right now, and it's public information, it's the media, and how this impacts food safety. And we've been seeing tons of information out there. So Dr. Darren Detweiler's been writing articles on LinkedIn. There was a huge video that was put out on CBS News, and I'll put the link to that here at the end, of going over food safety and what's going on and all these aspects. And so we wanted to take a look at this from that perspective of communication, because what I've learned, Joe, and I'm sure you see this too in your work, is that you have your crisis management systems and you have all your food safety programs and things like this. And a lot of times what gets missed is the communication piece of it. And man, you can have the best internal systems for recalls and all these activities. And if you have poor public communication around it, it's going to sink you. I mean, especially if you go out and you have negative messaging.
Yeah. And I think as everybody realizes, your external communications with regulatory, with the media, within your industry, is just as important as your internal, probably more important. Well, it's equally, if not more important than your internal communications, because that's the face that the public is seeing. I think we saw this with some recent recalls that have happened. One in particular where their immediate response was, "Well, we're under federal inspection guidelines, not our fault, right?" So, in the meantime, through that whole recall, nobody owned it. Nobody internally said, "You know what? It's my fault. It's our fault." So, I think how you communicate with media will make or break. A couple of years ago, Barry Callebaut had that recall at their facility in Belgium, and had a salmonella outbreak, and they ran a master class and I teach about this, and I give my clients this story too. They came out publicly and they said, "Look, we've got a problem. We shut the facility down. We didn't wait for the government to do it. We didn't wait for any illness or sickness. We knew we had a problem. We shut the plant down. And we're not reopening it until the Belgian government says it's okay to reopen it." And in the meantime, they paid their employees throughout the whole course. It's like a TED class on how to run a recall, and their business took a hit during the implication, but other facilities picked up the slack. If you don't communicate it properly, and it's never telling the public what they want to hear, it's telling them the truth, and they may not want to hear the truth, but they'll have it. And how you position that, it could cripple your company, no doubt.
Well, and at this point in time, right, I think there's a combination of things going on here, right? We have much more visibility into what's going on and a whole lot of different ways to get information now. And those news sources are businesses, and they're all competing for clicks. And so they want that headline. As we were getting ready to go on air here, we were talking about another recall that you had pulled up with Cabot Creamery, where they're having a recall for butter for coliform, which is weird. And when you get into the detail, you're like, oh, multi-stake outbreak, coliform in butter. Oh my God, right? If you're a consumer, you don't know if that's good or bad.
Right.
And when you go down into the details, Joe, it says 89 cases.
Mm-hmm.
They recalled 189 cases of product, less than half a pallet.
And the news articles say indicates possible fecal contamination. Wow, really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure. And to your point, everything is on the number of clicks, sensationalizing stories. You read headlines, and it's clickbait sometimes. But yeah, so we as our industry have to learn not to fall into that trap. Okay.
Yeah. You have to have in your company, and you have to prepare for these contingencies. Number one, with the media, as you'll see with this CBS story, if you haven't looked through this, you're combating a lot of things that are linked to you, may or not be true, may not be related to your industry. They're trying to spin it in a way that's going to make you look as bad as possible. Not to mention that there's groups out there, Joe, that are actively trying to make you look bad. So you have animal rights groups or whatever, if you work in dairy or meat industry or things like this, that are actively trying to infiltrate your operations and get video or talk with people to get dirt on you or make up dirt on you to make you look bad, with their end intention of, number one, they're also a business, right? They're trying to get more memberships and making you go out of business. You have to think about this, and we've talked about this here recently too, is contingency planning, is looking at these different activities of what could happen, and if these things happen, what will you do about them? And as Cortland's pointing out here with the CEO, is you have to have these plans put in place in advance, and you have to practice them, and you have to figure out from a communication standpoint. And this is a huge one, Joe, that I see all the time, and I'm sure you see this too. Who's the company spokesman? If you think it's that CEO guy, it's probably not the right person to put in front of the media. There was an issue here a couple of years ago with an ice cream company, a small mom and pop operation in Florida, that had listeria contamination, serious issue. And the CEO would go out and say, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with our product. FDA is full of it. Everything is good here in my company. We do everything right. To your point earlier, we're not going to stop selling ice cream. It's like, whoa, holy crap.
Yeah.
And thankfully, government stepped in, took away his license, and he could, they went out of business. And I look at that and I say, good, you should be out of business. You are jeopardizing public health. And that is a horrible message for the industry.
Well, and I think that harks back to and smells like the PCA scandal, where they knew there was an issue, and don't worry about it. We can't afford the loss. And anytime we put money over lives, this is going to happen, and it's going to continue to happen. Let's not be naive. This is going to continue to happen until there is a shift in paradigms, a shift in accountability. It takes a brave person to say, listen, I was wrong. I screwed up. Since the time my kids were 3, I used to always listen. You're going to make mistakes, okay, but own it, and you better come to me, and we can fix it together. But if I find out about it after the fact, you're done. And I think that should be how we run business. Where's my pencil? I'm getting back into my pencil phase. By the way, I really don't know why, but there's an eraser here on a pencil, and it's there for a reason, because we make mistakes. It's okay. But again, going back, and this is, this will touch into our crisis management plan. And do we have a public information officer on our staff? And your PIO probably should not be your plant manager, probably should not be your SQF practitioner or your BRC practitioner, but it needs to be somebody who, even if you have to have an outside service, provide that. If you don't have anybody polished enough inside, that's not the worst idea in the world.
Right.
To have somebody who's a professional speaker, a professional press conference giver, whatever the title is, not a bad idea to think about. Cost, I understand that, but you're already in a crisis. So
Yeah.
right?
And that's one of the key messages. That's a good point, Joe. One of the key messages I would always communicate when I was doing this work inside companies is um, you have to plan for these activities, right? You can't not, you have to put contingencies in place around all these activities. Is there a good comment down here? Please comment on the old PR phrase, out of abundance of, yeah.
I love
I hate, yeah, oh, that to me, right? So if you work in food safety and you follow recalls,
Yep.
the same language shows up time and time again. And why is that? Number one is lawyers write the statements, and the lawyers aren't looking at it from a consumer protection standpoint. Lawyers are looking at it from a company protection standpoint. Well, okay, we're not going to admit liability. We're not going to say that anything is wrong. We're going to imply that we are going above and beyond, on an abundance of caution. Yeah, BS. You're doing this because you have to.
as opposed to a little bit of caution. And that's always, that's my problem with that phrase. Out of a minor amount of caution.
Right. Well, and a lot of this is what happens, and I see this time and time again, is companies don't prepare for these scenarios. And what happens is a crisis situation happens. It always happens at a bad time. It's the Friday before Christmas. Nobody's around. So if you're trying to slap together a press release because nobody wrote one in advance, you're going to go out on the internet and copy and paste what somebody else wrote. Right. And so these sayings just keep popping up over and over again. But to your spokesman standpoint, too, is that, when the president wants to talk about an issue, he doesn't necessarily go out and talk about it. He'll send out a representative and say, okay, here's my press secretary. She'll answer your questions. And they have information relative to a particular topic that they can then talk to on those. And that is a huge skill set. And figuring out who's going to do that is critical. And to your point, the people who are doing the work, the food safety manager, the head of quality, the crisis management team, they don't have time to go out and talk to the media.
Yeah.
And to your point earlier,
skill set, right?
Yeah. And to your point too, Joe, is the CEO of the company, she's used to being in charge of that company. Mm-hmm. And their instinct as CEO when there's a crisis is to manage the crisis.
Right.
But odds are they're not the right person to do it. And you need to figure that out in advance. If you send that CEO out, now they're representing the company as well from all aspects. And they're going to get very nasty questions. Right? It's going to be like, yes, Miss CEO, as a microphone's going in their face. Why do you think it's okay to kill little children? Right. They're going to get questions like that. And you don't know how they're going to react. They could get mad.
I call that the sucker punch question because it's exactly what it is.
Yeah. And reporters are trained. They are trained to extract information, and they will get you angry to do that. Right? They will insult you. They'll just edit all that out. You won't even see that on the report. It will just be a picture of you in black and white where they stopped the video and you got to look on your face like this.
Right.
Right.
It's like the Alec Baldwin knocking the photographer down.
Yeah.
Meantime, what you don't know is the photographer was in his grill for 4 blocks and wouldn't get out of his way. I know.
Yeah.
As to your earlier point, the media has a job to do, and I'm not anti-media. Don't take this as anti-media. I'm anti-bad media. I'm anti-media creating sensationalism from nothing, like this Cabot butter recall. It's a Class 3 recall, by the way. So, we've got bigger fish to fry, I think. But what we all see, I think, is a lack of the whole story being told. And all of this is great, but the simplest way to avoid it is to everybody's point here, have somebody, have your PIO, your public information officer, have them ready to go. Because we don't know when the crisis is going to come. We don't know when we're going to have coliform in our butter. We don't know when we're going to have metal in our product, and now we've got to have a recall. We always know that the best way to stay ahead of a problem is just to, stay ahead of the problem. The best way to deal with it is just to stay ahead of it, right?
Yeah, and Daniel's got a question for us here. Thank you, Daniel. Are we talking about communication after the investigation has been conducted and the root cause identified, or is it communication before the investigation where we inform people? Both. So,
both, absolutely.
I've managed large class 1 recalls, serious issues. And so fortunately, nobody was ill. We caught it and we corrected it and things like this. But here's the really difficult truth about recalls is when the issue is identified, it's a potential issue. You don't know. So let's say, for example, Joe, you get a couple of complaints from the field. A mother says that her child has an allergic reaction to your product. Oh, right. And so you anytime you get a food safety type complaint, you're going to investigate that. It doesn't matter if there's 1 or 5 or what. You're always going to investigate, and then you're looking for those patterns. So you've got 1, and then 2, and then 3, and let's say, okay, these are all from the same product, from the same lot, from the same plant. I need to figure this out. And the bottom line is your information, when you first identify it, is going to be horrible information. It's going to be limited. It's going to be incomplete. You're going to be guessing, and you're trying to figure out if you have a problem or not. So generally within processes, what I always put in place, and I'll be curious about your take on this too, Joe, is you have a mechanism in place for identifying potential food safety issues from suppliers, consumers, internal, whatever. It then goes to you as a head of quality and food safety to do an initial take. And if it looks like there could be an issue, then you're going to activate that crisis management team to investigate. And you have to figure out pretty quickly, do I push the button or not? Do we really, really have an issue? And if you're 60%, 70% sure, you're probably going to go ahead and initiate. But once the horse is out of the barn, that's it, right? You're going.
At that point,
and it may be down the road that it wasn't as bad as you thought, but at least you were being protective.
Yeah.
So that communication piece, Daniel, and sorry for the long answer on this, that's that entire mechanism, right? There's going to be a single spokesman who's going to be managing that communication internally and externally for your teams and for any type of communication that needs to be done with the FDA or the media, local authorities, retailers, whoever your customers are. All these type of things need to be worked out. And there's only one way to do that.
Practice. when we look at our crisis management plans, and as I truly enjoy what I do because number one, I get to see things from both sides of the coin, right? I get to see things as the auditor sees them, and then I get to see them as the consultant would see it.
Yeah.
When we look at our crisis management plans, GFSI says you need to look at your known hazards or possible potential hazards. And everybody always puts the usual: fire, flood, tornado, earthquake, plague of locusts, whatever. Okay. I'm in a facility once in Montana, and I'm looking at their crisis plan. They list their crisis as fire. I said, okay, wildfires, floods. I'm like, okay, spring thaw, earthquake. And I'm like, not really a lot of, okay, you're in the Rocky Mountains. Tsunami. And I said to them, do you guys get many tsunami warnings here in Montana? I'm just curious, because if we get a tsunami in Montana, like, the ball game's over, right? But nobody puts in their crisis plan potential microbial outbreak.
Mm-hmm.
That's a crisis. Okay? Ask Boar's Head, ask Cabot Butter, ask Blue Bunny, ask anybody who's had a recall. We probably should be thinking about how do we respond, how do we handle the crisis that's caused by whether it's a class 1, 2, or 3 recall. So again, just some food for thought.
Yeah, and those different scenarios need to be practiced, because the hard rule here is that there's going to be a lot of people involved in this process that you normally don't interact with. Let's say that you're the quality manager in a plant, or your food safety at corporate. Your sales team is going to be pulled in, and they need to know what to do in this situation. All these different groups need to practice. Anybody who touches this, so your senior leadership team, marketing, sales, legal, operations, communications, all these different groups, and you have to practice these different scenarios, because there's one rule that's always true in these situations: is it's not going to happen the way you expect, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to think about these different scenarios. Is, okay, well, here's the scenario we're going to practice. We were just notified by our supplier of a raw material that it's contaminated. Oops, right? Okay. Companies are good at doing trace backs. Fine. That's the beginning piece of that. It's like, okay,
Right.
now how do we evaluate this situation? How do we determine if it's really an issue? So Alvin's asking a question here, Joe, and I'm not quite sure what he means by this. What do you think of using AQL? AQL.
Acceptable quality limits is what it stands for. It's and basically what it talks about is have you how do I say this? Is there a maximum allowable number of defects that you'll accept before you say this is not acceptable? And I think AQL is important when it comes to quality defects.
Yeah.
If you're in the quiche making business and you've got, you've made 1,000 quiches, but 4 of them burned on the edges. Like, what's our AQL for that? But I think when it comes to true food safety, not necessarily quality, I think AQLs are 0 because it takes one contaminated unit to, and as FDA says in 402A 3 and 4, whereby it may have become. So all they have to say is it may have been. But to his point, I think AQLs are important on the quality for quality defects. Yeah, it's a great
yeah.
question.
So those could potentially, I agree 100%. On the quality side, those could potentially be used as leading indicators that something's getting worse, right? So if you start seeing, back to our butter example, you start seeing coliform counts starting to go up. Okay, well, I probably have a sanitation issue going on, which may turn into a food safety issue. Right. So I may have salmonella in my butter at some point here in the future. Because the reason we test for coliforms is it's a proxy. It's in the same family. Yeah. And if coliform is there, number one, coliform super easy to kill, right? If it's there, you got a sanitation problem. Mm-hmm. So if that can grow, other things can grow. So you may have a problem that you need to investigate.
Yeah, it's a good indicator,
Yeah. So I think part of our theme today of what we're talking about, and this gets back to what Daniel was talking about here too, is it's very important to in this whole process with crisis management, is you have to be able to zoom in and zoom out. And so the zoom in piece is going to be all of your mechanisms and programs and certifications, all the processes you have in place in your company and in your plants to manage these things. The macro side of this is what we're talking about here today too, is you need to be keeping an eye on what's going on in the industry. And we're all linked together. So for your example with the chocolate, with Barry Callebaut, that impacts all chocolate manufacturers. Boar's Head, that impacts all deli meat, ready-to-eat manufacturers. You need to be looking at these failures that are occurring in your industry or the food industry overall and saying, how can this impact my company? And we're seeing this all over the place right now with what's going on with the government, right? We're seeing lots of articles on LinkedIn of, government cutbacks and laying off of people and NCIMS, all these different type of programs are being pushed back. And what does this mean for food safety? Number one, look at it through the lens of, okay, the media, again, what do they want? They want clicks, right? So they're going to write the headlines in a way that's going to get you to click. And it's meant to scare you. And part of this is you have to be able to look at all this information and then start producing contingencies around this and say, okay, well, if under Biden, and that's what's interesting with this whole thing, we're getting lots of press right now for the cuts that are taking place currently under Doge and people resigning and all these things right now. But these things happen all the time with new administrations. Under the Biden administration, they cut $34 million from state food lab testing. We didn't see large headlines over that.
Right.
And people are jumping to conclusions on a lot of these different things. Oh, wow, if FDA is losing a lot of their staff, that means that recalls are going to go up. Does it?
Did they? Should, and this has always been a bone of contention with me. Why do we have to depend on regulatory, whether it be FDA, USDA, anybody, to produce safe, wholesome products? Shouldn't that be incumbent of you? Shouldn't that be a moral imperative of you to produce safe, wholesome product? Why do we need FDA to come here and check us? Or you? Yes, and I understand they provide a service, and I'm not saying, for who's ever listening in cyberland, I am not saying I'm anti-regulatory. I'm just saying we can't. The math is there, okay? And Bryan shared some numbers. There's 443 investigators within FDA but we need 1,500 to inspect 36,000 facilities every 5 years and high risk every 2 or 3 years. Do the math. There are not enough bodies. We cannot rely on regulatory to keep us in line. Many of us unfortunately, rely on our customers to keep us in line, and you shouldn't be doing that either. I always looked at food safety, regardless of which hat I'm wearing. I always look at food safety we've all heard the cliche that someday my kid might eat this. Okay, well, there's food in my pantry, there's food in my refrigerator and my freezer from companies that I audit, and I'm like, do I feel safe yet? Yeah, I do. I'm not waiting for FDA to tell me it's safe or USDA. They do an admirable job under less than ideal conditions, from both, being in a cold, wet meat packing plant at 3 a.m, okay, to working holidays and overnights and weekends. It's a tough life, okay, and there's just not enough of them. There's not. So we have to and this is not a new concept. Costco and Walmart and Hershey's, Kellogg's, all of the companies who were involved in the growth of GFSI, that was the thinking 20 plus years ago. We can't rely on regulatory. We have to do it ourselves.
Right. And the bottom line here is that the regulatory standards are the baseline. Okay. That's not the requirement. You have an and associated with that. Okay, we're going to meet these base level minimums that the government's mandating. What other things do we need to be doing in our operations to be above that? Now, part of this, again, I think this is what's a challenge in this area for quality and food safety people, Joe, is that we're used to kind of playing in our own little world and doing our food safety stuff and writing programs and audits and stuff. This managing crisis management, contingency planning, all these things that we're talking about here today is probably one of the most externally focused outside of your department activities you're responsible for. And you're going to be doing things in your company, and you're going to be doing things in the industry as well. And you have to do the second one too. But you need to look at this information and talk about it like we're talking about it, and talking with your internal organization and say, hey, listen, if we're going to be relying on FDA to produce our safe product, it's not going to happen, right? They can't even audit the facilities as it is. We need to up our game. Here's some numbers that I have showing that FDA doesn't have the resources to manage these things. We need to manage it ourselves. And we need to make sure that our industry is doing this as well. Because to your examples earlier, a recall at Bluebell ice cream impacts everybody that makes ice cream. So what are you doing then to protect your business and communicating this information up in the organization?
I agree. It's I think so now we have fewer and fewer investigators and inspectors. If there is a crisis, if there is another foodborne outbreak, and we all know that unfortunately it will happen again, what does this now do to FDA and USDA's existing capacities? Are they going to be able to respond to these crises the way they used to? Well, yes, okay, because it's a crisis, but now that comes at the expense of who? It comes at the expense of the other facilities who are waiting on their inspector, particularly USDA, to come in for their daily approval. So it's a tough. We're in a tough spot as an industry. We're in a tough position.
Yeah, and this gets back again to our central theme around contingency planning. So you need to look at these type of things and say, okay, well, FDA's got a lot on their plate. They've been going through a lot of reorganizations, even going into last year. There's these new looming budget cuts. If I'm a person working at FDA, right, I'm stressed. I'm worried about my job and things like this. I need to establish, as a producer of food with FDA or USDA or whoever you're working with in your industry, I need to establish those lines of communication in advance. Yeah. So FDA is organized into districts. You have district directors. They're responsible then for managing investigations, and you have offices of crisis management. ORA, Office of Regulatory Affairs, is called something else now. I forget what it is. you need to be able to understand, and you need to narrow this down, and this could be difficult to find in times like this, is if I have a potential recall, who is going to be the person in my district who is going to be on the other side of the phone?
Mm-hmm.
Who's that person? And I need to establish communications and reach out to that person, guess what? In advance. You can do that, right? And if anything, think about that, if you're on the receiving end, you're working for FDA, Joe, and I call you and I talk with you or send you an email or whatever, I would recommend calling if you can get a hold of them. Hey, Joe, my name's Bryan Armentrout. I'm food safety manager at the dairy down here in your district. Just wanted to reach out to you and introduce myself and let you know that this is my cell and I'm available 24/7 if you need anything from me, if something's going on. Conversely, I want to know that I can, reach out to you if I have things that you need to be aware of. We have a potential issue so that we can address this as quickly as possible, et cetera, right? And building out those lines of communication in advance is really important. Number one, think about this. I mean, if it's on your side and I do that, you're going, this is a good player. This is somebody who's conscientious.
Proactive.
Yeah.
Right. And I've had this conversation and people say, oh, but won't that be taken as you're trying to suck up to the office, to the compliant? I'm like, I don't know if it's necessarily sucking up as it is, again, being proactive, right? The best defense is a good offense. If you get out in front of it. And does it foster some goodwill? Sure. Is goodwill important? Yes. But to your point, get to know the people you may have. And listen, if you're blessed and you play your cards right and you're diligent, you'll never have to talk to that person about a recall. Okay. But things happen. Things just happen. I've been involved in 2 recalls within my career. Ironically, one of them was over a coliform issue. And the 2 of them, the one broke on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend and one broke on the Friday of Labor Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
The timing, right? Could have been worse, could have been Christmas, I guess. But we knew who our district director was and our compliance folks, and we had a decent relationship with them. And it made the notification and the announcement of the recall much simpler. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to have, because the last thing you want to do is be stuck in the middle of a crisis, to your point. And I did have a recall I found out on December 23rd at 4 p.m. And in those scenarios, you don't have time to start trying to hunt down people and figure out who you should be talking with. You need to have that number in a list and all the other potential people you need to contact in a situation. Agreed. And it's just not recalls, right? To your point earlier, earthquake, a hurricane in Montana, whatever. You need to have the local numbers for the police and the fire and the FBI and who's your food lawyer? Who's your food safety lawyer that you can pick up the phone and talk to? I've been blessed in having really good support. And I have food lawyers that I use that I can call anytime I want and they'll pick up the phone because, they know if I'm calling that there's a problem and it's a weekend. It doesn't matter because they know who I am. If they don't know who you are, they're not going to pick up the phone. You have to have those things in place. All of these background things. One of the things that you need to set up, and I never see this done with my clients, I always make them do this, is do you have a website set up already that's not launched, that just sits on the side, that you can then turn on for a recall, that you can then direct people to? A lot of times they'll just slap a page together and put it on their main business page. No, you need to have a special dedicated website. You need to have the ability to quickly ramp up consumer response. If you're a large company and you have an internal response team of 20 people who work in customer service, they're going to be overwhelmed immediately if you have a large class 1 recall. Partner with outside agencies that do this, right? And have them on retainer so that if you need to turn on 1,000 or 2,000 customer service reps to help your customers understand what's going on and help them, you need to be able to do that. You can't set that up in the middle of a recall or a crisis situation. Too late, way too late. So you need to figure these things out. Now, part of what we're looking at here today too is all of these changes in flux that are going on that outward view. And you're constantly doing a risk assessment, and this is something I've been talking about quite a lot recently. Is risk is not static, Joe. It changes all the time. And our topic for today is exactly that. Government resources are going down. They may not be able to respond or investigate or provide resources that you need. Oh, my risk just went up. Why? Right? And then you need to think about it. Well, my risk has gone up from the regulatory side. My risk has gone up from a supplier side. So if I'm getting ingredients from foreign suppliers, FDA may not be able to do as many import inspections as they used to do.
Yep.
And bad players in other parts of the world may see that and say, "Aha, this is an awesome opportunity for me to get stuff into the United States." That increases my risk. And how do you communicate that information in your company?
You couldn't have said it better. There is the domino effect, the trickle-down effect, whatever you want to call it. If there are less resources here, we're going to feel them towards the bottom of the hill. You know, with the fewer resources now that we have within FDA, and I would say, I don't want to say all states, but many, the majority of states now have been doing contract work for FDA for years.
Yeah.
I live in South Carolina, and I can tell you both North and South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia,
Texas,
New York, all up and down the East Coast. The state ag Department of Ag does contract work for the FDA. So now, if there are fewer FDA, is this going to put more of a burden on the state level to conduct their routine annual audits of your facility? So how does this tie into the media? Well, number one, which is really the topic, it's incumbent of us to manage communication around this, both internally and externally. This is really a good time for everybody to revisit your crisis plan. You know, your crisis plan, it gets looked at once a year in your GFSI audit. You do your tabletop exercise. What was your mock? Oh, we simulated an electrical failure. Okay, good. The auditor looks at it. You did your once a year. You put it back in the binder. Okay. I'm almost done selfishly plugging here. I'm trying to put the finishing touches on a crisis response webinar. And one of the things that we're going to talk about is just like your food safety plan, just like your food defense plan, just like your food fraud plan. These can't be things that we look at once a year and stick it on a shelf. Okay.
Yeah.
They are living, breathing things that we've nurtured and developed, and we've fertilized them and given them a little love and a hug. And now they're these great programs, but we can't just revisit them once a year. Your susceptibility to crisis changes, I would venture, several times a year. We just don't know it. We don't recognize it. Anybody in the dairy industry right now, okay, I don't care whether you make fluid milk. Yes, just checking boxes is dangerous. That's a terrific point, Ryan. But just checking boxes. Now he's got me saying it. Just checking that plan once a year. Anybody, my point, anybody, I lost track of where I was. Anybody in the dairy industry should be looking, are we cleaning sufficiently that I have a client in the cheese making business. He makes a phenomenal bunch of cheese up in the North Carolina mountains. And I talked to him yesterday. I say, listen, I saw this recall come out. You know, are you getting milk from the same guy that Cabot Creamery is getting their milk from? No, we're not. Okay, so that's one less thing we have to worry about. But you know, the dairy industry should be looking right now at this Cabot Creamery recall, and are we susceptible? Yeah. One of the things that we don't think about in our communication plans are if things are happening in similar industries, right? Are we evaluating those hazards? And that's right there in your food safety plan reanalysis requirement. Mm-hmm. If we've had a failure of a preventive control or a CCP, or there's been something going on in our industry. Are we re-examining? And I don't think we're doing that sufficiently. I just don't. And to Brian's point, you check box, you're going to get in trouble.
Exactly. And it gets back to what you said earlier. It's proactive and reactive. And that's the two different buckets we're talking about here today. Is the reactive piece is, okay, if something does happen and the crap hits the fan, how are we going to react as a company? Let's practice that and these type of things. The proactive piece is frankly the more important part. And let me ask you this, Joe, with put your auditor hat on. You're evaluating these programs. You're doing it at a facility level. Do you ever then follow up and say, okay, this is nice that you're doing these things here at the plant level. What's corporate doing for these type of plants?
If it's a corporate multi-site, it depends if the paperwork is. Sometimes the facilities don't know, and that's a whole other topic to get into. But I like to ask questions like, when you do your food defense challenge, when you do your crisis management test, do you have corporate's involvement? I just finished an audit earlier this week of a 5-site company. And I was going through their monthly SQF updates to senior management. I looked at their annual review, their V&V, and everything is signed off by the VP of Food Safety. They have 2 divisional directors. Everybody signs off on it from corporate on down, and that's the way it should be, because now corporate is assuming some skin in the game, right? It's not just we're based here and wherever in Clover, South Carolina, and I got 17 plants, and they just kind of do their own thing. And when there's a crisis, they call me, but it can't be like that.
No, that's reactive. And another way to think about this is we need to function in quality and food safety like other departments do in the company proactively. So a good example of this is procurement, right? Procurement just doesn't go out and say, okay, I'm going to buy some ingredients and whatever the price is what I'll get. No, that procurement director is going to get fired pretty quick. The job of procurement is to strategically go out and look at the future and say, okay, we in our company, we consume lots of milk and sugar and cocoa or whatever it is that you're making. You're looking at the markets, you're looking at pricing, you're looking at hedges. You're trying to figure out ways to mitigate the risk to the company associated with pricing. And if procurement is successful, there's a lot of price spikes going on right now with cocoa. If procurement was successful and got contracts for a year at, say $3 a pound, and now the market spikes up to $7 a pound. Well, procurement has saved $4 a pound for that entire year. Are they going to be heroes? Absolutely, right? It's like they're forecasting the future. We need to do the same, which is really our topic of conversation. Every department in the company does this. That's all R&D does, right? Is they're trying to figure out what are the right products to be making 1, 3, 5 years from now.
Yep.
Operations, what's the capital plan for the next 3 to 5 years? Legal, what are our labor contracts going to look like over time? The CEO, if you have a good CEO, that's what they should be focused on almost exclusively, is trying to figure out what's the long-term plan for this company and how are we going to hit the objectives of the board of directors. We need to do that too. And a lot of times we're just too caught up in the moment in food safety and quality.
Does your procurement team, in an effort to buy the highest quality product at the lowest possible cost, as part of their approval process, and this ties into your supplier approval program? It's funny because so few places that I work with involve purchasing on their food safety team. I think your purchasing rep it should be like a federal law. They have to be on your food safety team.
Yes.
But are they, as a part of your supplier approval, as a part of your regular procurement, are you looking at that prospective supplier and their history? Okay, now we know we've got the reportable food registry. If you sneeze the wrong way, you're on the list. It's easy to call it up. Has your supplier been implicated in a recall in the past X amount of years? However you're going to look at it. So again, this whole topic is about communication, and I am a freak about clear communication. Is food safety communicating that to purchasing?
Yeah.
Is corporate communicating that to purchasing? Hey, okay, great. We're buying cocoa for, instead of $6 a pound, we're buying it for $1 a pound. Why is this guy selling it to me? Why is he willing to sell it to me for $1 a pound when the market is $6? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yep. And a perfect example of you should be married at the hip right now is all this activity going on with tariffs. Oh my goodness, right? If you manufacture your food outside of the United States and you're looking to ship in, let's say you have a plant in Canada and you bring your product into the US, and now you're going to be hit with a giant surcharge on your products.
Yep.
You're at a huge disadvantage to your US competitors, and you got to figure out what the heck you're going to do. So senior management may be saying, oh God, we have to find a plant here in the US right away and move our operations. We can't take a 25% hit on our product. We'll go out of business. Okay. So now what corners are going to be cut to approve that new plant that you've never been to, you've never heard of? It's like that really cheap, hey, you want, the guy with the overcoat in New York City. Hey, you want to buy a watch? Right? It's where did it come from? Right? Your risk has just gone up really, really high. You need to figure out why. So if the tariffs,
I'm laughing at do you want to buy it? You want to buy a watch?
It's like my overcoat. Yeah. So if now all of a sudden procurement didn't see these tariffs coming, and now ingredients that you're bringing into the US are very expensive,
right,
they're going to be trying to find something else. And there's no domestic cocoa, man. It's all foreign.
It's not like we're growing cocoa in Charlotte.
No, and so you got to figure those things out. You need to be knocking on the door of the procurement group and saying, hey guys, there's a lot of stuff out there that's impacting our procurement process. How are you guys addressing this? Right? Number one, are they going to be happy to talk with you about what they do? Yeah, absolutely. Right? You're not coming there as the quality person saying, you need to be doing these things. You're saying, no, explain to me your strategy of how we're working.
Right.
Food safety and quality need to be married at the hip with procurement. And the closer to your point, Joe, which was a great one, I want to reemphasize that, is you need to be working with those guys all the time because risk is always changing.
That's a good question from Valentina. I'm guessing she was saying, is it as strict as in other sectors? It depends. If your nutraceutical is intended for food consumption, my understanding is that it would default back to the GFSI level requirement. If the nutraceutical is going to pharma, then I would imagine it has that the crisis management would have stricter guidelines.
Yeah, and we're seeing more and more of this where you have medical claims for food and medical food you have as well too. I'm sure Cortland deals with these type of topics quite a bit. He's got a lot of expertise on that side of the equation. What's the correct regulatory bucket that these things sit in? Because you'll see these gray areas. They'll say, oh, no, this particular material is meant for external use or what have you, and it's not categorized as a food. And then your R&D guys want to use this as the latest superfood ingredient.
Right.
Can you say terraflower?
Right. How'd that work out?
Yeah, not too well. So really, as we kind of bring this back up to the 30,000 foot level, what does all this mean? And this gets back to what we were talking about earlier, Joe, of kind of really zooming into the small details and then focusing and going back out to the macro and looking at this and communicating with other groups. Is you need to think about what's going on at the government level and try and strip away as much of the hype as you can and say, okay, how does this potential actions with FDA, with cutting of resources at the federal level and the state level, how does this impact my business? And then take it up to the next level. How does this affect my industry? How does this affect food? And then figuring out what are your plans around that. Guess what? Senior management loves it when their leadership thinks strategically, right? You need to be talking about what could happen in advance and not doing it in a skies falling manner, but here's our contingency planning, right? We're kind of coming back full circle here. Here's some things that we're seeing out in the marketplace. Here's the actions I think that we should take to help mitigate our risk. Now you're protecting the company, you're protecting the consumer, and you're doing it in a way that helps educate the rest of the company relative to these threats.
Yeah, that's simply said. Um, 10 years ago, it was a lot easier being a food safety manager than it is today. And 10 years before that, it was even easier. And, so oftentimes now we still see where the GFSI practitioner is the QA manager, or now they've lumped it all together and made you an FSQA manager, right? So you've got pretty soon they're going to call you the FSQA PM SAN. You're going to be the food safety, quality assurance, preventive maintenance, sanitation manager. It's become a reality where food safety is its own separate thing now. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing several companies, in addition to their QA leadership, hiring a food safety manager. And the dividing wall between the two is one is strictly about product safety, and then the other one, quality focuses on what's going on in the plant and then raw material. So is that need being communicated back to our ownership? And many times it's difficult to get ownership to drink the Kool-Aid because it affects profits. And we all know that we as food safety nerds do not make money for our companies. We just don't. We're a cost center. Okay. But we're a cost center that you can't put a value to. So, and it's the proverbial, you're going to pay me now or you're going to pay me later. We see salaries are increasing. It had nothing to do with the economy and inflation. I see salaries rising within the audit world. The auditors are at salary levels now that I didn't see 5-6 years ago when I was at SAI Global. There are fewer auditors on the third party side. There's been some paring down of auditors by the CPOs. We're just getting older, fewer auditors. It's not any easier to become an auditor than it was 10 years ago. So we internally, again, and this all goes back to what we said earlier, we have to do this ourselves. We cannot rely on regulation to tell us how to do it right. We can't rely on, I'm not, this is nothing anti-GFSI. I think GFSI is critically important.
Yeah.
Food safety. But we can't rely on that once a year, 2.5 day audit. We just can't. The other 362 and a half days that they're not there, what are we doing? Are we doing, when I work with my clients, I explain to them, you can't rely on my coming to see you 4 or 5 times a year. You can't rely. So if I'm with you 4 days a year and maybe I'm there that's 8 days plus your 2 days. So that's 10 days out of 365.
Yeah.
A lot of things can go wrong in those other 355 days. Can't rely on your hired consultant. You can't rely on regulatory. And this all has to be, here it is again, communicated. Our needs in the trenches have to be communicated effectively to leadership.
Right.
In a world that's becoming more difficult.
Yeah, and that gets back to, right, I think too often, and I get this comments, I've had some side conversations with people, right? We're very attracted to the tactical, right? Write this procedure, write this process, perform this audit, do all these type of activities. Once you're a leader in these areas, the strategic piece is more important. Okay? You need to build up that credibility in your organization. So as you're communicating this information, and you're not doing the Chicken Little, the sky is falling, and we need to do, being lecturing people and wagging the finger. Nobody likes that. They're going to walk the other way. You need to be part of the team, and you need to build up that credibility. So when something does happen, you can manage it correctly, and you have the authority and the power to do it, because that's what it comes down to, right? Power is the ability to perform work, and you have to be able to execute quickly in those situations and manage it correctly. and do it in a way that's calm, right? You're in that maelstrom of a recall. You need to be the calm voice and saying, yep, we have this issue. Our job is to protect the consumers and our public. And here's our plan. And we're going to execute against that. And everybody's going to go, yes, sir. And that's what you want to get to. And so a good way to keep track of this is keeping track of things. So as I talked about, I have my locals group where I post recalls 2 or 3 times a week, and it's free. All you got to do is sign up, and you can also have it push notifications out to you so you can keep on track. I also pulled up, so Joe's company, Comprehensive Food Safety, that he works for, does a great job. Here is his website as well. So that's in there now too. So keeping up on this stuff and being ahead of the curve, super, super important. And on that note, a housekeeping note here really quickly as well, Joe, is no food safety chat for the next 3 weeks. So I'm off for 3 weeks.
What?
I've been talking a lot about risk assessment and having this as that next level of control in companies. I have a product that I've created for this, and I'm launching this product. And so I'm going into hermit mode, and I'm going to be putting that together and launching that here in mid-May. So look out for that. That's coming. And this is going to be really what we're talking about here in the show of helping to protect your company against those risks. So I'm really excited about that.
Good deal.
Yeah. So what's that?
3 weeks.
Yeah, I know.
What are we going to do these next 3 Fridays?
watch
coffee. What am I going to do? I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe I'll post some best ofs or something like that. There we go. Do the Johnny Carson thing. So with that, guys, we're over time. Got to get going here. So Joe, it's been a while since you've been on here. Thank you for coming on. You're a fantastic guest. I love having you on.
Thank you.
And of course, everybody here, some new faces here in the chat. I love that, right? These new perspectives help all of us grow.
Absolutely.
And if you stop growing in this business, you're hosed. So always continue to learn and grow, and hopefully we help with that. So with that, we're going to close out the chat here for this week. And then so the next chat will be, as I look on the calendar here, on the 9th of May will be the next chat. And so we'll put that all together. And I have a special guest already arranged for that. So that's going to be pretty cool there. So we'll bring our chat to a close. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself next week. Do it all over again. And thank you, everybody, for what you do.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Enjoy.
Thanks.